A clear economic direction is what all Nigerians, investors, both domestic and international portfolio managers are waiting for. Muda Yusuf, Director General, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, joins me now as we continue our focus on this. So good morning to you, Mr. Yusuf, and thank you so much for coming in.
Good morning, it's a pleasure.
And happy holiday to you as well.
Thank you very much.
So looking at conversations that have been ongoing, and expectations with regards to the announcement by the president of his cabinet, what are your thoughts? I've had conversations with a couple of market watchers as well, and they say the key focus should be trade and investment, finance, and of course planning. What are your thoughts?
Well, all sectors are critical to this economy. We have sectoral ministries. We have ministries that deal with kind of macro issues. So virtually all the sectors are critical. But what is important is to have people that really have very sound technical understanding of the issues, people that will have the courage of their own conviction, not people that will just, pander unnecessarily to the president. I say this because when you talk about managing the economy, there's a bit of scientific angle to it. Economics is social science. And there are things you do, the outcome you can easily predict. That is why it is a science. The president is not an economist. His background is in the military. And he needs to also be properly guided on economic matters. And those who will do that should also have the courage sometimes to even disagree with the president. Because policies is not about what is popular, it's about what is sustainable.
But in terms of looking at how sustainable this policy should be,
Yes.
What ministries would you say are key at this time? I mentioned trade and investment, I mentioned finance, and I mentioned planning. From your perspective, with regards coming from Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, what aspects would you say are key game changers? What ministries are key game changers for the economy?
No, let me put it this way. Ideally, ministries are supposed to implement the economic policy of government. They are implementing agencies. Ministers are not supposed to go and formulate policy. That is one issue I have with the current arrangement. Because up till now, there is no clear economic plan for this administration. The ideal thing is to have the plan. And once you appoint your ministers, the ministers will begin to implement the plan. But coming to your point about which ministry is key, just as I said, all of them are key. But what I think should happen is that because of the interdependence of some of these ministries, because of the linkages between policies, monetary policy, fiscal policy, investment policy, tax policy, all these policies are linked one way or the other in the way in which they impact the economy. So we should be talking of a team that can make things happen. A sound economic team comprising the Minister of Finance, Trade and Investment, National Planning, and the economic advisor to the president, and as well as the Central Bank of Nigeria. So what we should be looking out for is not so much of a micro issue of looking at which ministry is critical, which is not critical. We should be looking at a solid team that will be able to prevail on the president and give him a very clear economic direction. And once there is a consensus, everybody will go into its different compartments and begin to implement, both at the macro policy level and at the sectoral level.
Do you think in terms of implementing those policies, they should leverage on previous policies and actions from the former administration?
Of course. I mean, it's a question of assessing what policies are on ground. There are legacies of President Jonathan that could be sustained. There are some that you may not want to sustain. Take, for instance, it was President Jonathan that initiated the power sector reform. It's already on course. We may not be there yet, but we need to consolidate on that so that we can have maximum value from the reform. We also had ongoing reform in the oil and gas sector. So far, there has been no clear pronouncement by this administration on the direction of the oil and gas sector. And that is also very critical. Because for investors, what people are watching largely now is the body language of the president and the few pronouncements that he has made. And he has made some very fundamental statements, which has a lot of implications for what investors will do or will not do. And my feeling is that perhaps some of those statements were also not, it wasn't ripe to be made because of the kind of signals it could give to both domestic and foreign investment.
So what is the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry doing with regards to this? Because it's causing more than a few palpitations, not just for domestic investors, but international investors as well.
Well, what we have said is that there was need, and we have made quite a number of representations to the key ministries and to the presidency itself. There is need for proper engagement of the stakeholders so that we can have a proper direction. Because this is a democracy. This is not just about the personal conviction of the president. It's about what collectively we want to do to take this economy forward. The president means well. But when it comes to economic policy matters, there is need for proper engagement and proper consultation. Because that is the way you can enhance the quality of economic policy. So there has to be, because we have been saying all along that we should have an economic plan. If you have an economic plan, you can begin to debate it, even before the appointment of ministers. You know? And we also said, okay, if you have an economic team or an economic advisors, because economic management issues are as urgent as the issue of security.
Yeah, because we also have to remember that right now the economy is battling strong macroeconomic headwinds, not to mention the fact that we also have global issues with regards to oil prices, issues with the foreign exchange reserves and the rest of it. But do you think that at this time the president should be focusing more on putting together a cabinet that has more administrators than technocrats?
No, it should be more of technocrats. I know that when it comes to issues of appointment, there are also all sorts of pressures, especially from the political front. But as far as managing the economy is concerned, the key ministries have to be managed by technocrats. Technocrats that have confidence and that have courage of their own convictions. So that is very key.
In picking technocrats now, yes, should it be homegrown or international? I had a conversation very recently with another economic analyst, and he mentioned that it should be a combination of both. It should be somebody who is mostly home-based, but's got international backing as well, international qualifications, if you like to put it that way.
This thing is not rocket science. These things can be managed by people, by technocrats within the country. Because we are talking of a science. The principles are universal. It's just like talking about a medical doctor. Whether you are trained here or trained abroad, the principles are the same. If you are talking of issues of volatility, managing the market, ensuring that you don't have unnecessary liquidity in the system, reducing your domestic debt, these are things that you don't need. It's not rocket science. So the principles are the same. It doesn't matter whether it is homegrown or foreign-based or whatever. The principles are the same. But what is important is that we should be able to localize whatever policies we want to put in place. That is taking into account the peculiarities of this environment. Because there are some policies that may work here that may not be able to work outside here. You know, you have to take into account all sorts of sensibilities and look at how well some of these policies can impact on growth and how sustainable some of these policies are. Because it is important to stress this point. The fact that a policy measure is popular does not mean that it is the right policy. Because when I heard the president said he's not going to devalue the naira, I was taken aback. Supposing the oil price drops to $20 per barrel, are you still going to retain the exchange at the current level? So these are statements that some people have been applauding.